Welcome back to the Gen X Remix, Midlife, Laughs, and Next Acts, the podcast for bold Gen X women who are done playing small and are ready to build a business or career that lights you up. I'm your host, Tabitha Jones, the corporate escape Sherpa and career advancement and leadership coach. Before we dive into our episode, I want to give a quick shout out about my upcoming workshop, Escape with Confidence. Clarity, purpose, and action for your bold next act. It's a 2-session workshop series presented by me live on Zoom. And it's for Gen X women who are ready to finally get serious about building their next chapter with clarity, courage, and a step-by-step plan. And we know you want to do this before you leave your day job. Come join the workshop. You'll find the link in the show notes, so be sure to grab your spot. Now, today's episode is one you're going to want to save and maybe share. We're diving into a conversation that doesn't always get talked about, and that is divorce done differently. My guest today is Karen Covy. She is a total powerhouse, a divorce coach, a consultant, mediator, a collaborative divorce professional. She's also a speaker, author, and podcast host, and a recovering divorce attorney. After decades in the courtroom, Karen saw how broken the system was and set out to reimagine what divorce could look like. Now she helps people move through one of life's hardest transitions with less drama, less stress, and a whole lot more strategy. We're going to talk today about how to take back your power, how to make smart decisions during a really emotional process, and how to avoid some common pitfalls. Whether you're navigating a breakup or supporting someone who is, you're going to want to hear this one. Let's jump in. Karen, welcome to the Gen X Remix. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh. Let's just dive in. Let's talk a little bit about, my favorite question for every guest is, what is your remix story?
Which one do you want?
As many as you want to share is perfectly fine.
There have been so many twists and turns along the way, but I think probably the most recent or most visible one is changing from divorce lawyer to divorce coach, which was, it doesn't sound like it would be such a big thing because I'm still working in the same field with the same kinds of people. However, the role I play as a coach is very, very different than the role I played as a lawyer. And I was a lawyer for a very long time. So making that switch from lawyer to coach was kind of big.
And that just kind of fired off all the thoughts, like, what is the difference? So I think that's a great next place to go. So tell me a little bit about what is the difference between being in that lawyer role and moving into more of that coaching role.
As a lawyer, this sounds pretty basic, but what you're working with is the legal system, right? You are guiding people through the legal end of divorce. The challenge is that divorce is way more than a legal issue. It's financial, it's emotional, it's social, it's your identity, it's practical. It's where do you live and when do you sell the house and do you sell the house and when do you see your kids? And it's all these things, right? So the legal part of most divorces is about 10%. And as a coach, I slipped into the role where I'm dealing with the other 90%, right? So I'm helping people actually put together a plan, put together a strategy and a plan for the entirety of their divorce, not just the legal part of it. So it's a completely different thing. And lawyers they're very direct. They're very, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And as a coach, I do a lot of, okay, let's talk about what do you want? How do you feel? How do you think? Lawyers don't want to get into feelings. That gives them the heebie-jeebies, right? They just want to know the law and the facts, and let's stick with that.
That makes a lot of sense. And I kind of think about all of those dynamics, right? Sometimes it might feel like someone going through the process and working with their lawyer, like things are maybe getting away from them a bit because it's just check the boxes, do the thing, get it done. There's not that care piece that comes in with how are you doing? Are we still on track? Has anything changed? And I get the sense that you ask a lot of questions and get really deep with your clients.
I do. As a coach, that's my job. It's to help my clients uncover for themselves what matters to them. And then together we help craft a plan. Because fundamentally, when you're going through a divorce, you are going to be faced with making more important life decisions in a relatively short period of time than you will in any similar time period in your life, right? So having your head in the game and understanding how to make those decisions becomes important. And that's a conversation. That's the role that I play as a coach. I help my clients become the CEOs of their divorce, make better decisions, put together a strategy and a plan for the whole picture, not just one piece of it. Whereas a lawyer is really only concerned with the legal ramifications. How do I get my client from the beginning to the end in the legal system and make sure that there's nothing that the documents are written properly, that there's nothing in there that's going to come back and bite them later. So it's an important function. I would never tell anyone, unless you've only been married for like 2 days, that you don't need a divorce lawyer if you're going through a divorce. You absolutely do. You at least need a consultation, probably a little bit more than that. And if you've got big legal problems, then yeah, you really need a lawyer. But coaching is as important, and it really fills out the experience for people so that it doesn't have to be like the biggest trauma of your life.
Really powerful, actually, as I think about it. And I tie it a little bit to the work I do with helping women plan their corporate escapes. I always say, start your next thing before you leave the stability of that day job. And I would think when it comes to planning life after a divorce, it's kind of the same. You don't just go, I'm out and go do your thing. You need someone to help guide you through that conversation and all of the things they should be thinking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Except that, there's two circumstances. I mean, one, people don't know divorce coaching is a thing. And so they're trying to make this decision in a vacuum. And you can't make a good decision unless you have proper information, right? If you don't know how divorce works, to go jump into that right out of the gate is a really bad idea, because you could be in a world of hurt if it turns out that there were things that you didn't know about that come back and bite you, right? So getting that solid base of information is important, although a lot of people skip that step. And then you've got the people who their spouse is the one that wanted the divorce, so they don't get the choice. They don't get the time to prepare and make sure that all their ducks in a row. So for those people especially, a divorce coach becomes even more important, because time is a luxury you don't have a lot of.
That makes sense. The other thing I can imagine is there's probably a lot of second guessing that goes on. And with so much at stake, you've got to make that decision and make sure that you don't regret it later. So, how do you help people decide whether they should move forward with that process or really just make sure they're making the right decision for themselves?
By asking a lot of questions and by helping people dig up what's inside of them. First of all, even though I've had many a client who wants me to tell them what to do, um, that's not my job, and I can't do that for anybody. However, I can help my clients, or I can help you figure out what makes the most sense and feels the best for you. Because biologically, decision making, we all think we all want to believe we make decisions rationally. That's not true. Biologically, neurologically, what happens is you're making decisions based on instinct and gut and intuition, and then rationalizing it later. It's just that our brain is such a great processor that it processes decisions, it processes things really fast. And so it tells you, oh, you did this because, but fundamentally you did it because you had a feeling. You felt a certain way about it emotionally. There have been studies done about people who had brain damage, like there was this one guy, Elliot, who had a grapefruit-sized tumor in his brain. The surgeons went in, they took the tumor out. Very successful surgery, yay. The only problem was Elliot's emotional centers, the emotional parts of his brain, were damaged. So he came out of surgery, he could walk, he could talk, he could function, everything was great, but he was emotionally flat. And they're like, well, okay, not optimal, but he should be able to function. Except that what they found was that, Elliot couldn't decide what to have for breakfast in the morning. He couldn't decide what route to drive to
Wow.
work. He couldn't decide what to wear. He could not make even the most basic decisions. And subsequent studies have, followed up and found the exact same thing, that our decisions are really emotional. And then the second that we make it emotionally, our brain comes up with the rational reason, which makes perfect sense, by the way, to us about why we did that. And that's why good decision making, especially in divorce, when your emotions are all over the place, requires you to get some emotional control and to line up your head, your heart, and your gut. Because when those three things are in alignment, that's when you're going to make a decision that you have confidence in, that you don't regret later.
It's great. So much value in that head, heart, and gut. Okay, got that. I'm actually going to write that down because we all second guess ourselves on so many things. But when you look for that alignment and you find that alignment, especially when you have the help of a coach to help you get there, I mean, it does make a difference. Is there a right time to divorce? And if so, like, how do you know? Do you know when you're there just because your three pieces are saying it's time, or is there more to it?
There's a little bit more to it than that. I mean, you can get the three pieces all lined up. However, life and your situation may say, yeah, you feel like it's the right time, but for this, and this, and this reason, you might have to wait. For example, a lot of people, the reason most people wait is till their youngest child graduates from high school and goes off to college. Now, for a lot of reasons, that's not always the best decision, because unless your children are really not smart, and most people have children that are smart, right? They're going to figure out, oh, I went to college. 2 months later, mom and dad got a divorce. And all of a sudden, they look back and they say, was my whole childhood a lie? Were they
Mm,
were they only staying together because of me? Did I make my parents miserable and suffer because I was there? And so that can start if in a child who didn't see it coming, who thought that their parents were actually getting along and doing pretty well, those kids get hit really hard if that's the decision that you make. But that's what, other children won't do as badly. Like if you came from the household where mom and dad were always fighting and you were like, why don't you two just end it already? Then when you go to college and they get a divorce, you're like, okay, I got it, right?
yeah.
But for the kids who didn't see it coming, that becomes, that can become problematic.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's a it's a bit of a different ball game when there are kids involved, and we do see a lot of people waiting until the kids head out to college, and that kind of leads us to the topic of gray divorce, which seems to be a trending topic these days. Are you seeing a pretty good spike, maybe now compared to the past in gray divorce?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. There are way more people who are, and let's define gray as over 50, right? Although some people go gray early, but over 50 divorce, there's a that's the biggest demographic of divorcing people. And I think the reason for that is we're living longer, right?
Mm.
I don't know what the average lifespan was, but for example, when Social Security was set up, they're like, you get Social Security when you're 65. And everybody was like, yay, but you're dead at 70, right? That it was never supposed to be as long of a term thing as it is now because people weren't living as long. Now they are. And so now people retire at age 65 and they're looking at their spouse and they're thinking, I have to live another 20 years with you? Oh, that's not going to happen. And so they're looking for more out of life and their lifespan is longer. And so I think that's kind of why we're seeing the influx of, or the growing trend of gray divorce.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think about this a lot in the aspect, I guess, just kind of time and generations. When my grandmother was my age, which I am now 54, when she was 54, she seemed old. She seemed like a grandmother. She seemed like, the person who didn't go to work much longer. She maybe worked a couple more years. And I think about me at 54. I'm not a grandmother yet. My baby's 30, so one day it's happening. But, I don't feel like I'm looking at retirement. I feel like I'm looking at doing the things I love and being energetic and having fun. And it seems like we just live differently now. And I don't know if we're just more vibrant, we're more healthy, we're living longer, we take better care of ourselves. I don't know, menopause, and we're kind of at that whatever kind of a point. But it is really interesting how much we've changed over the past few generations, and then how this change has also kind of aligned.
100%. And may I add, you do not look like a grandmother either. So,
Right.
so yeah, I think we, like, as humans, as society, we've really changed a lot in what do we want out of life? What is available to us? Another thing that's different, that was very different from my grandmother's generation, was that we have employment opportunities and we start businesses and we have careers, and none of that was really truly available to women, you know, 50, 100 years ago at the same level and scope as it is now, right? Yeah, people, there were the outliers even back then, but it wasn't something that most women were able to do. Now they can, right? And now if you're healthier longer, I know plenty of people who don't want to retire. They love what they do and they want to keep doing it. And why not? I mean, look at Warren Buffett, for heaven's sakes. He's in his 90s. Nobody wants him to retire.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. My financial advisor all the time, she's like, "So has your retirement date changed?" I'm like, "I am going to keep working as long as I'm having fun." And it just took on a job with a friend's startup. Like, I am having fun all the time. So I don't think about an end because I don't want the fun to end. And we're all in this kind of cool space. I think there are people our age who are looking forward to, I'm retiring at 65, and that's
Mhm.
great. But for the rest of us, we're like, nah, no, that sounds boring.
Yeah, but what's beautiful about today is you have a choice. Before, there were less choices available to people. You just went along a certain path, and that's what you did, and that's what everybody did, and that's the way it was. But now, if you want to retire, God bless, go retire. You don't want to retire, God bless, keep doing what you're doing. You have the option and the agency to be able to make a choice and do whatever you want to do and live life on your terms.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So, what are some of the biggest mistakes people make when divorcing?
One of the biggest mistakes is jumping in. We've already talked about it. Jumping in before you really understand how this is going to go, right? Now, obviously, nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody can predict every step of the way. But if you have an idea of how it's going to go and you walk in the door and you are prepared and you have a plan, things are going to go better. Another thing people do is they walk in and the first lawyer that they talk to, that's who they hire, and that's the direction they go. The problem is they don't take the time to understand what are their divorce process choices. Here's what I mean. There's litigation, going to court. There's mediation, where you sit with a mediator and work things out. There's collaborative divorce, which is a whole different process unto itself, where you have a team that helps you through the divorce. There's arbitration, where you've got essentially a private judge. And then there are hybrids of all of those things. And there's, sitting down at the kitchen table and working things out. All of those are processes. All of those are possibilities for you. But if you walk into a lawyer's office, what the lawyer is going to tell you is what they do, not what you need. And you're going to hear it because you're emotional. This is hard. You don't know what's going on. You're going to hear it from the lawyer that's saying, "Oh yeah, we'll go to court. I will fight for your rights. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it." That's the lawyer that goes to court and litigates. The mediative lawyer, the one who goes with you to mediation, is going to say, "We can work this out. Mediation is great." But they're not telling you what's best for you. They're selling you on what they do, right? So that's a big mistake that people make, because they end up in a process that costs them more money, takes more time, makes a bigger mess. And it could be either way. Sometimes you have a high conflict person, you go to mediation, that might not go very well, right? But if you've got the person you want to work everything out and it's amicable and you go get the shark lawyer, now that's not going to work. So it's about choosing the process that's right for you and then finding a lawyer who does that.
Got it. So it sounds like on the client's end, it comes to asking a lot of questions and being clear. So maybe working with you first to get really clear about what style is going to work best based on the people involved in the situation.
Exactly. That's what a coach brings to the mix is the knowledge, the deep knowledge of the system. I mean,
Mhm.
because I was a divorce lawyer and I've been doing this for more decades than I will admit to in public, um, I can tell you, yeah, these are the things you want to think about. This is how this works, and this works, and this works. Here are your options, and here are the criteria by which you want to make a choice. Because if you don't know how to make the best choice, you're not going to do it. Yeah, and it's not because you're stupid. It's just because you don't have the knowledge base from which to make the best decision. So that's one of the things that I, as a coach, help people do and navigate it, not just for what process to use. That's the first decision. You're going to go down the line and make a lot of them after that. And so understanding how to do that becomes the skill set that you get that stays with you, not only through the divorce process, but beyond.
That's amazing. I'm learning so much right now. So my questions are some of our listeners are going, "Oh, I didn't think about that." But I think that as you're sharing this, it's really putting the pieces together. I understood a bit about what you did, but now I understand even more fully the value and the importance and the fact that this step is clearly missed so often. And I would believe that working with you makes a really great difference in the person's stress level as they're going through it and potentially in the pain at the end because everything that ends has some pain points that come with it.
Look, no matter who you work with, divorce is never going to be easy and it's never going to be fun. But if you plan properly, if you prepare yourself, if you equip yourself for dealing with the situations that you're going to have to deal with as you go through this journey, you're going to do it better and you're going to have less what I call unnecessary pain, right? You're not going to be stressed about what if this happens and what if that happens and what if, like, for example, one of the things that happens that my clients always come to me is they'll say, he said that I'm never going to see the kids again. He's going to take them away. Or she said she's going to take me for everything I've got. Or, like things like that, because they're listening to somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, talking out of anger, right? So one of the things that will bring the anxiety down is knowing the truth. If you understand that the things that your spouse is saying to you are not going to happen, then you don't get yourself all in a twist and you're up all night, you can't sleep, you're thinking about, oh my God, what if this happens, what if that happens, and you get into what psychologists call awfulizing. You think the most awful thing is going to happen to you and you're wasting so much energy and you're expending so much emotion and it's painful. That's the part you don't have to do. Suffering is a choice. And if you arm yourself with knowledge, is this going to be painful? Yes. But are you going to suffer at the level that you would if you don't know what you're doing? No, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, there's just so many variables. And I imagine every client you work with is different. Do you have a favorite client success story that you can share?
Okay, I won't use names,
No names.
but there was a client that I had, and she was a very high achieving professional working a corporate job, just crushing it at work, but definitely on the hamster wheel. Like this woman was always going, and she needed a divorce. She'd been married for decades, had 5 kids. They were all grown, right? And she was done, like done, 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 but didn't have time to deal with it. And what most people aren't going to tell you is that getting a divorce is like having a second full-time job. It's work. So she was running in a million different directions and didn't know what to do. She hires me and I'm like, okay, let's get this, manageable and make a plan. You're going to do step 1, step 2, step 3. And when she would be like, oh no, but what about rein her back in. No, 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 no. Step 1, step 2, step 3. So through coaching, she was able to focus. And what I will tell you is that she was able to sell her condo, she sold her condo. She moved across the country because she had to move for her job. She got a new place. She got through the divorce. Everything was settled. They settled it themselves. She walked into an attorney with the terms. The attorney wrote them up, walked her through court. Long story short, the woman, I think, paid $4,000, $4,500 in legal fees total for both of them because her husband was underemployed, so he wasn't making as much money as she was. And she got divorced on her terms, the way she wanted, with a reasonable fee. And then after that, the way life happened, left the corporate job and went on to start her own business. And this woman was on fire. She lost 40 pounds. She was happier than I ever saw her. If I hadn't seen with my own eyes what she looked like before versus what she looked like after, I would not have believed it. She was an entirely different human and life was her oyster.
That's amazing. And it just goes to show the power of having that coach on your side that can help guide you through it. And Karen, that has to feel so good for you. I have seen the ugly side. I have seen the side where people don't go and do that. And it whittles away at your confidence, at your self-worth. It whittles away at your finances. It
Mhm.
generally ends up resulting in a whole lot more than $4,500 in legal fees. I mean, it's heartbreaking to see what happens sometimes when people just kind of dig in and don't get that support.
Yeah, and nobody wants to do that. Nobody intends to do it. But the problem comes when you don't know what the right thing to do is. And so that's when you make mistakes and they compound because divorce is such an emotional area that it's easy. I mean, the first thing that happens to most couples the minute somebody says, I want a divorce, is that the trust level in the relationship goes to zero. Right. And so when your spouse does something that may be entirely innocent, you think the worst instead of the best. And so then you do something to protect yourself, which is a natural reaction. But then your spouse interprets that protection as aggression. And and you just keep one upping each other until you've created a mess that you don't need to make for yourself and for your kids.
Yeah, especially after decades of being together when that happens, right? It's just, I don't know. I've always said with people that are splitting, I'm like, don't make it ugly because there are going to be graduations and weddings and grandchildren. There's going to be so much in the future, and you don't want your kids to feel like they have to choose or, oh, we can't have our wedding there because dad this and mom that. It's like, make it as comfortable for everyone as you can, even though it is a hard situation.
Yeah. And, a lot of people go into this wanting to be amicable, believing that this will be amicable between them. But because they don't have the skill set of being able to work things out in a way that keeps it amicable instead of fuels the fight, it's not too hard. I mean, all one person has to do, or one lawyer has to do, is stir the pot just a little bit, and you can get everybody spinning in a very short amount of time. And so it's about having the plan going into your divorce, knowing what you want, knowing what matters, and having developed enough emotional control and the communication skills it takes so that you do keep your divorce amicable. And it's 100% possible. I have helped hundreds and hundreds of people have amicable divorces over the years. It's entirely possible, but you got to do it right. And if you step outside the boundary, it's just all too easy for things to ramp up. And it's harder to pull them back after you've made that mess than it is to just do it right the first time.
Yeah, I love that. We're going to take that, just do it right the first time and focus on what matters. I think that's a whole another thing that just people forget. You get into that emotion, you get into the fear, you get into the anger, and the next thing you know, you're fighting over the most ridiculous things. Nobody cares about the cookware. You can go get new cookware. Who cares?
Yeah.
Just,
My
settle the
favorite
big things.
story is the vacuum cleaner. So
Oh
I was
God.
in a settlement conference thankfully the lawyer on the other side was a reasonable human being, right? So there's this couple, they were young, they didn't have a ton to fight about, but they had some, retirement money and a house and kids and all the things, right? So we were in there and it was a slog. We were probably locked in this conference room for 4 or 5 hours getting it all. We got the entire thing settled. It was like the heavens opened. Everybody was happy. And then the one husband or wife, somebody got up, they were going to walk out the door, and the other person looked at them and they said, "What about the vacuum cleaner?" Wow! All of a sudden, these two people who had just settled their entire divorce were fighting over the vacuum cleaner, and they were going to blow up the whole settlement. That's it. Everything's off the table. We're going to court over a vacuum cleaner. And the other lawyer and I are looking at each other like, and finally he says, like, "Is this some kind of fancy, expensive, what is this vacuum cleaner?" And they're like, "No, it's a Hoover." And at that point, he looked at both of them. He didn't say a word. He pulled a quarter out of his pocket and he said, "Heads or tails? We're not doing this." And he
Oh
flipped
my
the
gosh.
coin, and whoever won the coin toss got the silly bet. Because at that point, what people don't realize is when you're fighting over the thing, especially if the thing is something like a vacuum cleaner, it's not the vacuum cleaner. That's not what they were fighting about. What they were fighting about in that moment was they both realized, uh-oh, we're done.
We're done.
It's
Yeah.
over. And so that's what the real emotion behind it was. And the
Wow.
other lawyer was at least reasonable enough to say, we're not going to blow this up because you need to come to terms with the fact that it is going to be done. And it's not about the vacuum cleaner.
That is quite a story. I can't even imagine. You can go buy 10 more vacuum cleaners for the cost of, another how many hours of legal
Yeah,
services.
it made zero sense
But the
if you
closure
were looking
piece,
at the
yeah.
level that it was. But if you knew what was underneath it, you're like, oh, yeah, okay.
Oh my gosh. This has been so interesting to me, Karen. And I'm sure our listeners are thinking, I didn't think about that. Or I wish I'd had someone like Karen in my corner. Or I'm stepping into this phase of my life. And how do I work with Karen? What is the best way for our listener to contact with you?
The best place is on my website. It's karencovey.com. And you can find all the things there. There's links to my podcast, which is Off the Fence. There's links to videos and blog posts and free stuff and everything you could want to know about divorce. Probably more than you want to know about divorce. You find it all on the website.
Excellent. And we'll include all of that in our show notes. So if anyone needs that information at their fingertips, it will be there. Before we let you go, are there any more parting words of wisdom or advice that you'd like to share?
Yeah, and I think it definitely applies in divorce, although people don't think about it. And it applies to any kind of remix. I mean, if you're thinking of changing your life in any big way, it all starts here between your ears. It's all about mindset. And when your mindset is in the right place and you work with yourself and you do your own work to make sure that you've got that growth mindset and that you're open to possibilities and that you look at whatever is happening as happening for you, not to you, everything changes.
I love that. So thank you, Karen. I really appreciate you for taking the time to stop by and join us here at the Gen X Remix, and look forward to staying connected and supporting you as you continue on this journey.
100%. I am thrilled. This was such a fun conversation. Thank you for having me.
Well, that was a powerful conversation. I hope this episode gave you a new perspective on what it really means to navigate a divorce with clarity, confidence, and compassion. Karen reminded us that divorce isn't just a legal process, It's an emotional, financial, and logistical journey. And with the right strategy, support, and mindset, it doesn't have to be a war. It can be the beginning of something better. So here's your challenge for the week. If you know someone struggling with a divorce or even just considering their options, be sure to share this episode. You never know what insight or encouragement could change the trajectory of their story. If you're enjoying the Gen X Remix podcast, I'd love for you to leave us a 5-star review, follow the show, and share your favorite episode with your network. Thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, keep remixing life on your terms. Take care.